Okay, here we are for activity one. And you know that I like to draw. So when I draw, I can make sense to myself, and I hope that it will help you. And what this comes down to is a description of what I'm drawing up at the top. That you will have, I hope, 3 medicine cups instead of 2. One medicine cup will have a solution of your enzyme catalase in it. One medicine cup will have the filtered water or the bottled water in it. And you will pipette a combination of these two to 5 different test tubes. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. From the 5 different test tubes, you're going to take your pieces of filter paper and wet them into one of the test tubes at a time, and then move them into the hydrogen peroxide solution down to the bottom of the hydrogen peroxide solution. You're going to time and measure here. That's very briefly what we're going to go over through here, and let's get into the details of it. The first thing you need to prepare is your hydrogen peroxide solution. So you see in number 2 here, you're taking 10 mLs of 3% hydrogen peroxide, and you're adding 10 mLs of bottled water at room temperature. And this is going to be your reaction vessel for your work on the enzyme. That's why I have the stopwatch and the measuring the ruler next to it, okay? And in number 3, you're preparing the 5 test tubes. And you're going to prepare them by using your Catalase solution, which you made up the 20 mLs of the 100%, and your bottled water. In doing so, you're going to be preparing these 5 test tubes. Let's look at what you're doing with those 5 test tubes. In here, you are preparing 5 test tubes that are the independent variables for your experiment. And your independent variable here is the concentration of the catalase that you have in your test tubes. I know you have a medicine cup of 100% catalase. You are going to also have test tubes that have 0% catalase, 25% catalase, 50% catalase, and 75% catalase, and 100% catalase. You are going to be looking at how these different concentrations of catalase speed up the reaction. Is there a period where you just have too much concentration of catalase in there? Can it continue to go up? You're going to find out by your data. And in preparing these 5 test tubes, you have a recipe in here that combines drops from a pipette into your test tube from the Catalase medicine cup. And you have, the recipe also includes drops from a pipette from your bottled water into the test tube. So your 0% test tube has no catalase in it at all. It is your control variable because it is not exposed to the independent variable, which is catalase. So if you go back and remember how we were looking at your scientific writing, your control variable and your control group, your control group is the group that is not exposed to the independent variable. In this experiment, the independent variable is the percentage of catalase. Okay, so I hope that chart helps you out a little bit. Here's your recipe for developing your test tubes. Make sure before you put that pipette into the catalase to take it out, make sure you stir the catalase. And after you make the recipe, make sure you swirl the test tubes. All right, stirring is going to be very important. So to come up here again, you're going to be swirling the Catalase, putting your pipette in, and then following the recipe for the other 4 test tubes. Remember, the first test tube is going to be 0%. It's going to be all water. All right. Keep those test tubes in your test tube holder. It'll be very, very helpful for you. And there's really nothing else that can compare to a test tube holder. It's just such a wonderful thing. So please make sure you have it out. Remember, swirl again, right? Now, you've made up your test tubes. Now you're going to be moving to your reaction vessel. You're going to be taking one of your filter papers by your forceps, and you are going to be wetting it in your test tube. There's information about exactly the technique you should use for wetting the filter paper in the test tube. You should be tilting that test tube so you're not dunking. You're actually letting the solution come to the filter paper rather than dunking the filter paper in the solution, right? It's all about technique and science. And then after you move this forceps and kind of drain off your filter paper, you're going to be taking the same forceps and filter paper, and now you're going to be dunking the filter paper on the bottom of the hydrogen peroxide reaction vessel. On the bottom, as soon as it hits the bottom, start the timer. All right, you are recording in seconds here. And the recording that you're making is you're saying, I have Catalase on my filter paper. It should break down hydrogen peroxide when it hits it. When it breaks down hydrogen peroxide, that should turn into water and oxygen. Oxygen gas should produce bubbles that can actually elevate the filter disc off the bottom of the reaction vessel. And we are timing the amount of seconds, or the number of seconds it takes for that filter paper to go from the bottom of the reaction vessel to the top of the hydrogen peroxide solution. And you're timing that down to tenths of seconds. When you are doing this for your 0% test tube solution, remember, that is your control group. All right. Now think about this. We talked about the fact that all of these reactions that we're talking about, this dissociation of hydrogen peroxide, could happen without an enzyme. It could happen without an enzyme. It would take a lot longer. It would use up a lot more energy. And so in our control group that is independent of the catalase, you may have a very, very long period while you are waiting for that filter paper to rise up to the top. If you get to 3 minutes, stop your recording of that particular trial, all right? And record it as greater than 3 minutes in your data sheet, all right? Now, remove the used disc that is either sitting on the bottom or it's sitting on the top of the hydrogen peroxide solution, and do one more trial of the control. You are going to be doing 2 trials of filter paper that has gone into each one of these test tubes with the different percentage of catalase. So you've done 2 of 0%, you're going to do 2 of 25%, 2 of 50%, 2 of 75%, 2 of 100%. You must remove the disc from the hydrogen peroxide. You're going to be doing 2 trials of each of these concentrations. Remember to swirl each test tube to mix the solution, all right, before you wet the disc, and tilt the test tube to wet the disc, all right. If your trials differ by more than 4 seconds, you can go beyond 2 trials to a 3rd trial. You have plenty of filter paper there. You're going to take the closest 2 trials in seconds of each of those percentages, and you're going to use that and throw out the third trial if you get a differential of greater than 4 seconds. All right. And you, of course, move from low percentages to higher percentages in your procedure. 2 of 0, then 2 of 25, then 2 of 50, then 2 of 75, then 2 of 100% Catalase solution. Always remove the floating discs with the forceps. When you are done with your 100% 2 trials, then measure the height of the hydrogen peroxide solution in your reaction vessel to the nearest millimeter. Use your metric ruler that you have in your equipment kit. That is going to be the distance that your little disc traveled. When you put distance over time, you have a rate. Your rate is going to be done in centimeters per second. All right, you're going to be measuring that height to a millimeter or 0.1 centimeters, and you are going to be measuring the rate in centimeters per second. Then you're going to be plotting that data and putting a best fit onto that data. I have a video there that shows you how to put the best fit onto the data. In case you are wondering how to plot your data, that goes back to your scientific writing experiment, and I'll give you the link so you can go back and find the instructions on how to do those line graphs in case you forgot. Now, big thing is this: if you planned really well and you can go directly to activity 2 and it has taken less than an hour, you can keep your solutions intact. If it's been more than an hour or you need to stop, then you need to wash everything out and work on activity 2 on another day or with a fresh batch of the hydrogen peroxide solution and a fresh batch of the Catalase solution. And we'll talk about activity 2 on the next video. Take care.